Welcome to the Spawn Chunks, episode number 148 for Monday, July 5th, 2021. My name is Joel Duggan, and joining me as always is my friend Jonny, but you may know him better as Back Garden Pixel Riffs. Hello, sir.
Hello, and very inside Pixel Riffs right now, but if you want to hear more about my back garden, Joel's herb growing habits, and Canada Day, you can listen to The Render Distance, the extended version of the podcast. You get that by supporting the show through Patreon at patreon.com/thespawnchunks. And speaking of our Patreon, it is the first show of July, so as always, we want to give a huge shout out to all of our patrons. A big thank you for helping us make the show, because the Patreon support for the show has been incredibly steady lately, especially with everything else going on in the world. We're incredibly thankful that we can continue making the show with all your amazing support.
Normally, I found the last few weeks, I've been leading the conversation about what we've been up to in Minecraft, but I'm flipping it this week. What have you been doing, sir, in Minecraft?
Oh, I've been flipped on. Oh, what's happening? No, I've been flipping a lot of things. Actually, I've been messing with people's villagers on the Empire's SMP, and I won't say anything more about that, and in case the person in question listens to this show, but he's going to find out soon enough. But elsewhere on Empire's SMP, I've been taking a slightly different approach to using candles, because I wanted to work candles into my builds in some way. I'm harvesting honeycomb en masse from bees, and I have way more than I really need to wax all of this copper, so I've been starting to produce candles. And incidentally, I ran into a double cave spider and double zombie spawner, which was not all four in one unit, but was basically like overlapped each other, so I can have three of, you know, either two of one type and one of the other. So I might be farming string for that pretty soon as well. But yeah, I've been using candles to represent the times that each of my server mates have died on Empire's SMP. There's a project I've been calling The Vigil, and I've got this monument set up in the center of my town with different colored candles, and there are only 11 of us on this server, so there are 17 colors of candles. It's easy enough to select one color to represent each player, and I've been asking the audience, for anybody who's, you know, watching the other members of the SMP that I don't have the time to keep up with their videos all the time, to let me know when somebody else dies in a video or on a live stream, so that I can add another candle to this monument in the center of town. And my hope is that as wars and stuff start to pick up on this server, because we're planning on, like, you know, a couple of storyline combat kind of things going on, if people end up dying more frequently, then basically I just get to expand it outwards from the center, and my town ends up getting better lit as a result, because I'm just placing light sources all around the pathways and stuff that lead up to this central monument. But I kind of like the idea of having this big lit area in the center of town that seems like a hub for everything, even when it's nighttime.
That's really cool, and I keep on forgetting to use candles. Like, I haven't really explored them much, and you could really have a cool ambiance happening with that many candles. I mean, depending on, I guess, on how often people die, but as things progress throughout the server's season, that could end up looking really, really cool.
Yeah, and it's going pretty well so far. I mean, like, some of the players on the server have died over and over again because we have that player head plugin data pack that allows you to obtain your own skull to use in various builds if you want to put it on armor stands and that kind of stuff. And so I think Smallish Beans has died 12 times, so that's already like 3 bunches of 4 candles in the monument, and has probably died several times since then. But yeah, some people try and stay alive as much as possible and have only died a couple of times, so there's a lot of variety in it, and everything ends up looking a lot more colorful, considering that the color palette I'm working with in the desert is mainly focused on dry and warm colors. It's, you know, the sandstone a lot of the time, but all of the paths are made out of that combination of granite and rooted dirt and bricks and all of those kind of warm terracotta reddish kind of orange colors. So it's working out pretty well so far. I also have a really fun couple of uses for candles, because I was building a cactus garden on the other side of the town, and that's going to lead up to probably some more houses in a residential area. But there's a lot of different stuff in the non-cactus palette that you can bring into a cactus garden. Like I planted a few sea pickles there, and then I thought, oh, green candles will probably look like little cacti growing in a bunch as well. And there's a few different things you can put in flower pots, like bamboo. And I ended up using a whole bunch of different stuff. You can also put... because candles float, they don't have to be attached to a block. You have to place them on a block to begin with, but you can take the block away and they will still float. So what I've been doing, on the recommendation of somebody from my community, is placing a bunch of candles on a block and then growing a cactus up underneath it, so it has those little pink flowers on the top, provided by like a cluster of 3 candles, which looks really good. Yeah, it looks like a flowering cactus that you'd find out in the wild. And so I was pretty happy with that as a detail. So I'll try and find a picture of the cactus garden so I can put that in the show notes this week if people are interested in seeing that.
I'm glad you can do that, because one would think, I mean, the question was in my mind before you answered it here, that like, wouldn't the candles pop off where they were once the cactus grew up into them? Like, that's what I would expect, right?
Yeah, no, you can still get them to float. They won't place against the side of a block, so you can't just build them in midair to begin with, but you can remove the block underneath them and they will hang there unsupported.
Do you have to wait for the cactus to grow, or can you just place a cactus block on? Like if you wanted a 2-high cactus with the candles on top, you get the candles up there first, and then you grow the cactus underneath. Can you place the cactus, or do you have to wait for it to naturally grow?
You can build cactus, and amusingly enough, you can build it taller than the plant itself naturally grows. It's like sugarcane.
Yes. Yeah,
so,
no, I knew that. Yeah.
Yeah, so you can place a couple of cactus blocks underneath there if you don't want it to grow. I think it will still grow naturally.
Right.
But then, obviously, it won't grow any higher if it senses there's a block obstructing it, and it won't break off because it's not a solid block that's, like, adjacent to it. I also discovered that you can place a couple of other like entity type things next to cactus, because obviously cactus is a problem when it comes to anything more solid like slabs or whatever. A lot of the time you can't place that next to it because it will break the cactus plant. But then sea pickles are fine. The coral plants I was using in my garden beds around the town are fine. And yeah, candles will do basically the same thing. Also, moss carpet layers will do that. So now I can place a little bit of moss in that area, and it accounts for, the lack of height variation that you could normally put around a cactus plant. So yeah, I've been having fun decorating with that kind of stuff in the desert, and it certainly helps to break up the sandy environment, especially since I'm building with sandstone as the primary material for all these houses.
Man, the paths in this area look fantastic. I love the bamboo and the I looked like it's warped wood and perhaps copper accents, like half block stripes through the sandstone walls. Brilliant use color. How I also really like this monument design thing. I know you spoke about this before on the show about wanting to have like conduits as like a source of power and like floating crystal type things. How did you come up with a design for that? Because that looks really cool.
There's an artist who I've been following on Twitter for a while named Cosimo Galuzzi, who does some really fantastic sort of almost ethereal sci-fi illustrations. And there's a lot of his stuff which has this kind of vibe, or the kind of vibe that you get from like space western kind of style shows or media, like Saga, the comic book series, is one that I'm thinking of in particular. But there's a few others, and there's just like a couple of mergings of organic stuff and technology and weird kind of floating structures and things in his art that I think is just really cool, and has been one of the main sort of inspirations for the aesthetic of this area from a sci-fi angle. I've got a couple of his prints that I still need to frame and put up in my office because I find them so fascinating. But
nice.
Yeah, it's just the kind of stuff that I've been thinking of. What does this area have going on technology-wise, magic-wise, spiritually, and trying to build up more of a lore around the area when, I'm trying to set myself apart from everybody who's doing a more medieval vibe for their kingdoms, or, building castles and rooting it in very much like a real world aesthetic. I'm trying to go a little bit more fantasy, more sci-fi, bring in influences from like Star Wars and the kind of stuff that, there are a whole variety of different worlds that people have built out there that I feel like I can loosely scratched the surface of with the stuff I'm building in Minecraft now.
And it's funny, like as much as I complain about like Minecraft generation floating bits and things that I think, that looks dumb, or people that chop down trees and leave them hanging somewhere is because they've got like a piece of log that they forgot to take down. The floating mechanic in Minecraft, when you're doing sci-fi stuff and you're doing more fantasy type things, really help in that kind of like suspension of disbelief and like fantastical magical kind of realms, with like just having something like that, because of the way that you've placed the blocks, it just feels like you can imagine them rotating, or like slowly or floating up and down, and you're like having some sort of just like pulse to them.
Yeah. There's a couple of other video games I've played that have structures like this as well. There's like stuff that's either in Mass Effect or in like a Final Fantasy video game or something, that, or even stuff like Breath of the Wild. There's these odd sort of floating structures and unexplained things that I think don't necessarily need to be fully explained in the lore of the world to have something very striking about them visually. And so that's what I'm trying to go with for some of this stuff. I like the idea that the conduits can be almost like magnetic in a sense, that they can hold up structures above them without needing any visible support, and maybe copper tying into that, but maybe not. There's a bunch of cool stuff we can do. Outside of Empires, I'm focusing a little bit more down to earth on some stuff in the Hardcore Survival Guide series, where I'm mostly just focusing on the same stuff I do in regular Survival Guide, focusing on the game as, a series of mechanics and so forth, and adventures and stuff too, but with less of like the storyline angle to it. So right now in Hardcore, I'm gearing up to take on an ocean monument, and that's mostly right now the struggle of getting Depth Strider on my boots, because I won't raid a monument without them. I need the maneuverability, because half of my strategy for taking on an ocean monument relies entirely on just not getting hit by guardians, which means you need to be able to duck behind pillars and that kind of thing. And especially in Hardcore, when I've only got one life, I need to make sure I can avoid them where possible. So I'm taking water breathing potions, I'm taking doors with me so I can create air pockets if I need to, and we're going to try and take on the ocean monument for tomorrow's episode. So I have yet to record that. Cross your fingers for me, but hopefully it should all go okay. I've raided a few monuments in my time, and I think I've got the technique down now.
It's been a long time since I've done an ocean monument, and I know that would be a good driving force for me to go get some more like netherite armor and gear up heavily before, because I remember it being, I remember dying a couple times. I don't remember if it was like one of those like really bad like loops where you're just dying 6, 8, 12 times, but I definitely found it challenging. But this was, we might have even done it before 113, and then I've never bothered to do it since, right?
Yeah, it's definitely something that's gotten easier over time, I think, and maybe that's just player preparedness. Maybe that's people's interest in using stuff like tridents now, which will do more damage to guardians. I don't have a trident in the hardcore world, but I'm also kind of scared to go near the drowned that will drop any, so maybe I should avoid that for the time being. But yeah, I think it's one of those things that it's always quite a fun thing to do for the first time in a new world, and I think having had the Citadel for as long as you have, it hasn't felt like a new world for a while. If you've got a Guardian farm, or at least enough Prismarine that you want to be getting on with, then you don't really need to raid another monument unless you want large quantities of sponge, I suppose.
Having more sponge would be good for some of the water projects that I end up working with, and there is, from a purely technical challenge, it's more of I would like to build this farm, not that I need this much Prismarine. There are there's at least one spot where there's a double Guardian farm. Like, you would load in both if you built your farm collection in between the two of them, and then you cleared them both out. I'm pretty sure that, especially with I think it was Cub Fan that came up with a design about the soul sand and fences for that kind of a farm. The one that we have now is like a smaller, I call them citadel size farms. It's got a tank inside the monument. We decided to keep the monument the first time we did it. So you have to go down inside of it, and then there's like a small tank where they all spawn. It's still a decent raid, but it's an AFK. It's not a pop by for 10 minutes and get a ton of stuff. It's like you have to sit there overnight if you really want a lot of things. But a double Guardian farm, I think just the pure spectacle of that many Guardians coming through, and I'd have to do some research. It might be beneficial to send them to the Nether instead of trying to kill them in the Overworld. I don't really know.
Yeah. I think that's what a lot of farms tend to do now is use the nether to kind of free up the mob cap again. But I've never quite enjoyed those farms because, especially in a single player world, it relies heavily on the nether not being loaded and then loading in everything at once as soon as you step through a portal. And I don't know, sometimes there's some stuff that gets lost there, and if you end up with somebody else in the nether that can load those chunks but be far enough away to despawn the guardians, then you lose some of the capacity of your farm. So
Right.
yeah, there's sometimes you have to have a second account to get it running, so if you're dropping them from height into lava or whatever, then they'll die, and all of the drops can come back through a portal to the overworld. There's a few different approaches to it, but yeah, I never quite enjoy those farms when honestly an overworld farm is fine. It's perfectly usable. Speaking of farms and the overworld and the citadel, we raided you the other day and you were kind enough to show us the moss farm at work. That thing is a beast.
Isn't it?
That is really quite cool to see in action, and it's been a while since I've built anything that sort of size redstone farm wise, so it's really interesting to see it working in a survival server. And I like what you've done with the honey wall. Tell the people about the honey wall, because it's fun.
Thanks, man. Yeah. So I think I was listening back to the last episode of Spawn Chunks just for pure, quality reasons. Just want to make sure that when I'm reading an email, I'm not flubbing up and trying to get myself, sorted. And I remember saying, I'm going to decorate this next stream and then we're going to be done. Famous last words.
Right.
I am now part 8. Each of these parts is roughly a 3-hour stream. I'm on part 8 of this project because I think I've put just as much time, if not more, into the storage system in the water, way than I have the actual farm. Because of course I didn't have to design the farm; I adapted it from an El Mango design. But basically, after we've finished the farm and have everything going, it's a double water stream, so it's 2 wide, which is unique, and that's just because the iron farm is a 2 wide centered build, and so I decided to center the moss farm on that as well. But it actually has helped us in 2 different ways. The water, the collection of the items is split in half and then in half again, and I don't have to do anything fancy. It just so happens that the right side of the farm goes to the left side of the water stream and vice versa because of just the momentum of things going off the edge of the water flow. And so half the items get up top. They get split naturally by a double wide elevator that goes in 2 different ways, 2 different directions. They fuel the bone meal into the farm, and then the rest of the farm, the 60% of the farm, is just shot out the front in this double wide waterway. Now eventually I bring it down into 1 wide and take it into the storage system. And I wanted to do something unique, and I used honey blocks at the top of the farm because I thought that they matched the shroom lights. And that the purpose of the honey blocks was to get things up to the edge of a water stream because honey blocks have a smaller hitbox. And so I thought in the storage system, I want the storage system to look like the farm. Like I want it to look like it's receiving the same things that this farm is putting out. So the farm has got dark oak, green glass, and kind of like orangey accents. And so I was trying to think about different ways to get items into the hoppers and not have to deal with, because I found this really cool natural water cave right next to where I was building everything, and I thought this is gonna be perfect. It looks like a lush cave. I just have to give it a little bit of love and it'll be great. But I didn't want to put this standard filter behind my storage system and thus in this cave having this big redstone, everybody's seen them 100 times, the Impulse SV filter. And so it took me a long time to figure out, but essentially what I've done is I have all the water stream going above the cave. The filters are above everything, and they go into auto droppers. The droppers then spit their items out into cobwebs, and this is important. The cobwebs then slowly have the items pass through them. They drop the items into the center of a water stream. That water stream shoots the item into a honey block wall, and then the item slowly drips down the honey block wall because that's how, just similar to a player would. And because of the cobweb, I can have all 5 of these blocks next to one another and they don't overlap. Without the cobwebs, the droppers were shooting things so randomly. You'd get moss blocks 2 hoppers over, you'd get azalea saplings 3 blocks over. Your hoppers at the bottom would just end up being a mess. You might as well not have a filter to begin with. So while you're sitting there with this monstrous farm going, there's a constant stream of stacks of items, whether it's moss blocks, azalea saplings, moss carpet. I think I actually have 2 filters for moss blocks because there's that many of them coming through. And it's really fun to watch. I was hoping that it was going to be a little bit more constant. If anybody remembers the Matrix, like that digital kind of waterfall of ones and zeros that they have in the movie, I was hoping for something like that, but you just can't spit the items out that quickly and have them not cross streams. But it was really fun to work that all out. And because of the speed of the farm, it actually works out to be pretty active. I was disappointed at first, but I realized that I had forgot to turn on. I had forgot a comparator in 4 of the 5 filters. So I was like, why is this thing so slow? What did I do wrong? It turns out that only one of my filters was working. So I was like, okay, well that's why I'm not getting the items that I need. So I fixed it all up, and it now that it's working at full speed, it's much better. And the other thing that I added, which was really, really fun, is that on the other side of it, so hoppers, they only take in 2.5 items per second. This farm puts out way more than that. And so you have to loop your water stream back around. So things that don't get picked up by the filters the first pass, they have to get picked up by the second pass. That, or you just put everything into a lava flow and just trash it. So I have this thing loop around so that the items are constantly going into the storage. And then on the loop, I actually have a bunch of hopper mine carts on rails. There's 4 of them. And they pull out the excess that's not getting stuck into the hoppers and put it into bone meal, not filters, but like composters. So droppers will spit out the items. They'll drop through the air into the bone meal. I'm still working on this section, but basically I have like the bone meal is automatic, the filter is automatic, and at the end of all of this, I'm going to have a comparator on the bone meal storage. And when the bone meal storage is full, it'll turn off the farm. Like I'll send it out and say like, all right, we're full. You can stop producing crazy amounts of items in the spawn chunks, please and thank you.
It's so cool. It's so great with it being like a self-sustaining redstone contraption, but that was farming blocks for you at the same time, and also it feels like one of those projects that you just want to bolt on all of these extra things that it does, right? Like you've got the storage filters, you've got the bone meal stuff. You're like, okay, the bone meal is getting rerouted back into the farm. Now you're like, if it has too much bone meal, it can stop. And then it reminds me, I think, of like when you had a potato and carrot farm, you basically were like, send all of this to composters, but then when this chest starts filling up, then send it back into the system so it can be used for villager breeding. And you've got so many different like attachments, basically, this kind of modular farm setup going on. It's really quite a cool project.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate that. It's the thing that I like so much about these kinds of farms is the fact that it's self-sustaining. I don't have to go and fill it full of blaze rods or gunpowder or something else. Like you have to. It's an overworld farm. Moss composts all the things from the moss farm that you get, they all compost into bone meal. So you don't have to ever fill this full of bone meal. You don't have to go sit at a skeleton farm and then, make more bone meal. I don't know if I'm ever going to have to go to a skeleton farm again. I haven't had it running while I've been streaming, only because the one drawback is that the pistons are quite loud for sorry, not the pistons, the droppers. Droppers are quite loud for the amount of things that are going through. There's just this constant clicking. So I don't know exactly how quickly I'm going to get things going, but in tests, I've got like 3 and 4 stacks of bone meal in just a couple of minutes. It certainly puts out stacks and stacks. We've got 2 double chests of moss blocks already, just from the few times, like when you pop by on the stream when I say, hey, look how cool this is, and I run it for a couple of minutes and then I shut it off. It's like, chests full of things.
Yeah.
But it's been really fun to work with something completely different than the medieval area, and not that I'm done with the medieval, not that I'm sick of it, but I was hitting a bit of a roadblock trying to find some new blocks. Plus there was the excitement of 117. You kind of want to work with the new things and have fun with that kind of stuff. And we've got this question a lot in email inboxes asking like, how do we do this, or how can I stay fresh on this world? Like, how can I do these long, projects like you do? And I really think the key is just having a bunch of different areas on a server, or a bunch of different projects on the go, where if you hit a creative wall, or you just get bored of one and you're just like, I do want to finish this, but I just don't want to finish it right now. Being able to switch gears completely, especially for me, going from medieval building to farm, like redstone, high tech waterway. Got to do everything, around that. Was a really nice brain switch for me. It felt fresh, it felt new, and now I've moved on to decorating a lot of the things, and that involved going out and trying to hunt down some of the new 117 blocks. So having the exact opposite experience from my snapshot world, I found glowberries in the second chest I looked in the first mineshaft. The mineshaft, I knew where it was, because here's something that we were thinking about. Because on stream, I was just like, I don't want to have to start looking for days. I don't want to have to go hundreds of thousands of blocks looking for something. So I thought, do we know if abandoned mineshaft chests generate their loot tables when the chunks are loaded or when the player opens the chest? Well, just so everyone knows at home, it's when you open the chest.
Yeah.
So,
I actually have something to quickly add to this. If you go into a world in spectator mode, not in survival, but if you load up a regular survival world and you put yourself in spectator mode using cheats, if you go and right-click on a chest in like a dungeon or an abandoned mineshaft, if you right-click on it to see what's in it, it actually says unable to open, contents not generated yet.
Oh, cool.
So you can actually see that in action in vanilla Minecraft if you just want to like go up to a chest in spectator and try it. Once you have been to that chest and opened it, even if you leave the contents in there, a spectator account can still go and take a look at what's in that chest as though you've just opened it as a survival player. But it's something that I knew already just from the fact that if you fly around in spectator and click on stuff in a vanilla world, it will say we haven't generated these contents. So presumably you could then find a chest that you hadn't opened in an existing mineshaft and still have a chance to get glowberries.
Exactly, which is what we did. I went to a mineshaft that I knew where it was, and I knew I hadn't explored it yet because it was in the modern city. And I was just like, I'm in the building the city. I don't want to go on a mineshaft exploration right now. I don't need anything in here, right? But now with 117, I need something in there. And so we found a cave spider spawner as well, but we also found glowberries. And then I had to go back again, and I thought, the thing with the geodes, and we'll get into this a little bit later in the show today, I wanted to try and find a geode as close to where I'm currently playing as possible. And so I thought, I know I trimmed the chunks fairly close in the modern city, definitely really close in the medieval area, but because I wanted, most of the things I want the amethyst for is more than likely the tinted glass for the modern city, not necessarily, the other blocks. Although at least the ones that are farmable, right? So again, we went to the modern city, found a cave nearby, found another abandoned mine shaft, and found a massive geode. Like it's probably 20 blocks wide in terms of diameter. Like it's big, and walked right by it at first, and then found the backside of it, and then realized that one of the mine shafts actually goes right into it. There's rails in the geode, which was really cool to find. And again, found it within 10 minutes of looking. So like
right
on the survival snapshot world I was running, it was several streams of looking for geodes and never found any glowberries. So to have these things quite quickly on stream was a real windfall, because it means that I could turn right around after getting a couple stacks of calcite to decorate the bone meal section of the farm. I could grab some amethyst crystals to kind of experiment with those later on and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, it was a nice windfall there. Getting the glowberries was essential because that's how I wanted to decorate and light the area of the storage for the moss farm. And this leads me into a mechanic that I wanted to talk to you about, and that is, man, are cave vines a pain in the butt to try to decorate with and control.
I mean, you're preaching to the choir, Joel. Having decorated with a couple of them now, I'm like, I have the F3 screen, like the debug overlay up every time I work with cave vines, because you don't want to put string around them, because
nope.
The string thing just bugs me. I know it's like the most invisible way we have of stopping plants grow, but I know it's there, and it bothers me, and I feel like it's like when you walk into a room and there's a cobweb just like over the doorway from a spider, and you just kind of do that thing where you scrabble at your own face because you feel something sticking to it. I get that sensation in Minecraft when I walk through the hitbox of some string, because if it's like dangling down at player's head height, you see this like slab-sized wireframe just generate around the hitbox of the string, and so you know it's there. And so I have been working with that age mechanic that they applied to vines in the same way they applied to kelp, but growing downwards instead of growing upwards, where the maximum age a plant can reach is 25. It starts with a randomized age, and then once it grows enough segments that it adds 1 to the age each time, it gets to 25, it stops growing. Which means if you want a vine to be only 3 blocks tall, you basically have to re-roll the age by breaking and replacing the plant until you get one that's age 23, and then okay, that's going to grow 24, 25, and then it's going to stop. And that's just a bit of a pain to work with. Like, it's essential for me, but it does mean you really have to farm a bunch of glowberries before you do it, because it's a lottery, a lottery with 25 possible outcomes, really.
And it's a lottery at a loss. Like, you don't get it back. So you have to have like 2 stacks of glowberries in your inventory. And it's a good thing that they're incredibly easy to get. Like, almost like laughably easy.
Now that you've got your 14 chests of bone meal at your beck and call, you can do plenty of glowberry farming. But again, that's just like, let me stand next to this plant, hold a right click until I have enough, and then just start breaking and replacing it over and over again.
This is going to spoil my idea if you know the answer to this. Does it work with dispensers? Like, if I put dispensers and glowberries in dispensers next to a cave vine, and I hit like a repeater loop on it, will it bone meal and just spit them out everywhere in the same way that you can do it with 2 tall flowers? I
don't know if the dispenser can remove the glowberries. I know that you can bone meal them to grow the glowberries, but right. I don't know if that's then a matter of breaking the plants to get all the glowberries to drop, or if that's something that a player would have to go through and harvest them. I haven't looked into farming them enough, because if it's something that you can just stand next to it and bone meal it by holding down right click and gather stuff that way, I don't really bother setting up automated farms for them. I feel like that's for the people who want to farm things for the sake of farming them, rather than just however many you need for aesthetic purposes.
Yeah. I realized that even on stream, and as patient as I am as a player, I was really running out of it working with these cave vines. Like, you'd click and you'd remove, you'd click and remove, and I had a beacon nearby, so like even clicking, I'd be careful. I was trying to be careful not to bust more cave vine than I wanted to, and I would end up doing that by accident. It's like, oh gosh, like, it really did feel like there should be a better mechanic to get them to grow to the height that you want, in the same way that we just talked about earlier, where you can grow cactuses past their natural growth, you can grow sugarcane past their natural growth by placing things on it. And I understand why this is the way it is. It means that in 1.18, when massive lush caves are generating and these vines are dangling from the ceiling, it means that you're going to get these really cool random like growths of cave vines that's going to look very natural. It's going to look very cool. There's going to be glowberries on them. I understand why it works this way. But in a similar way to, was the warped vines and crimson vine? No, what are they called?
Like twisting vines, and weeping vines.
Weeping vines, thank you. You bone meal those and they grow exponentially. So you don't have quite as much control. But I think once you've done that, they don't grow anymore, right? Like, if you dangle twisting vines from the ceiling and you bone meal them a couple of times and they're not quite to their full length, they don't grow anymore, right?
I think they will grow just as much as they have space for over time. But then in the nether, naturally, you're used to just seeing them grow down to like wherever the netherrack floor is, and that's kind of it. So
so I just feel like there should be a better way. It's so funny, like the cave vines are so hard to get to where you want them to be, and yet the glowberries are so easy to get. Once you have 2 of them, and bone meal, you're golden. So I don't. Like, I feel like there's this weird gap in between of like, could I harvest the cave vines with shears and then just place as many as I want? Like, that seems like a pretty reasonable way. In the same way that you could put cactus down, you can just make the cactus as tall as you want. I just feel like it would save the players a lot of frustration and that for the people that want to do this kind of thing. It just feels like the RNG of the age of the plant is just a little bit tedious, because it goes like, you'll get like 8, and then you get 18, and then you get 20, and then you get 6, and you're like, oh, it's not what I want.
I feel like there might be something coming in future where cave vines become their own independent thing, because right now I feel like they're not as consistent with the mechanics of other plants. Like, if you break kelp, you get something that you can replant kelp with, if you break cave vines, you don't get anything, and you replant them from the fruit of the cave vines, which is the glowberries. And I don't know if there's many other plants that really work like that in Minecraft right now, so I don't know if that's something they will revisit in future for the sake of consistency or not. But the obtaining them and like how difficult they are to get right versus how easy they are to farm actually ties into a discussion we're going to have later. So
Right.
I think I'll save the rest of my thoughts on that, and let's move on to the news.
Sounds like a plan. There was a bit of news in between last week and this week's episode. Minecraft Java Edition 1.17.1 Release Candidate 1. A first and hopefully only release candidate for Minecraft Java Edition 1.17.1 is now available in the launcher, fixing a few more crashes and bugs. If nothing critical is found, we expect this to be the release as the full version of 1.17.1 on Tuesday, July 6th. That's tomorrow. That's a quote from the blog post. In between then and now, last week and now, Minecraft Java Edition 1.17.1 pre-releases 2 and 3 were put out. The major changes include deaths of named mobs are now logged when they die. So if a mob has a name and it dies, it's logged as this name has died, as opposed to just like skeleton or zombie or whatever. Fixed bugs of note in pre-release 2 include that calcite is too quiet compared to other blocks. Emerald ore generates too often. Attempting to walk through flowing water constantly switches the player from swimming into normal mode. I might have been experiencing this on the server last week. Diamond ore distribution changed between 1.16.5 and 1.17.
There are a few fixed bugs we noted in pre-release 3 as well, namely captured axolotls constantly trying to leave water, axolotls despawning even though they were named and on leashes, and placing a small drip leaf in a full set of water source blocks resulted in the top half of the drip leaf deleting the top water source. All of those have been fixed as of pre-release 3. There is also an update to the Caves and Cliffs prototype data pack that contains all of the 1.18 world generation that's being tested currently. No major changes there as far as we can tell, just a continuation of the data pack to update it for compatibility with 1.17.1. There is also a pre-release version of Optifine, version 24, released on June 27th, 2021. Via twitter.com/Optifine News is where we're getting most of our information on the progress of Optifine. It did mention that Optifine for Minecraft 1.17 is now 96% complete, and hopefully as we're getting a 1.17.1 release at some point this week, hopefully we should get an Optifine release for that fairly shortly afterwards.
We did get some email last week in correction to some of the things that I was talking about with regards to sodium and iris. Thanks to the folks that wrote in over the past week. Really appreciate it. If you do write in with corrections for that kind of thing, if you can remember to include links in your emails as well, that's really handy for us because it means that we can go and confirm the information, because we had several different emails and several different dates, and depending on what date that information was sent, the information was either correct or incorrect. Iris previously came bundled with its own version of sodium for 1.16.5. That holds true. Iris shaders is available on the website, and Iris version 1.1 plus sodium for Minecraft 1.17 is available on curseforge.com. That was released on June 29th, which was after our show last week. Iris comes bundled with a version of sodium that it is compatible with, despite the fact that sodium is currently in development for 1.17. I do have a quote from the Caffeine Mods Discord to read about that. Beta releases for sodium on Minecraft 1.17 are no longer made available on the Discord server. This might change again in the future, but it's driving an unmanageable amount of users to our front door. That's from Jelly Squid on the Caffeine Mods Discord FAQ channel. When will sodium be available for 1.17? Short answer, when it's ready. There is a link that we'll have in our show notes to github.com with the Caffeine MC group. They have a thread that they linked from their Discord that explains when it's coming, how they're working on it, what challenges they're facing. So if you have questions about the sodium release for 1.17, best to read the FAQ on the Caffeine Mods Discord, or again, pop over to GitHub with the link that we have in our show notes, and you can get caught up there.
want to show all kinds of support for those people doing the good work, because I know there's a lot of folks who now rely on these things for performance for older PCs, especially as the Java version of Minecraft continues its path into the future and adds all of these new features that might show up a little bit of performance issue for folks who are still on older hardware. For myself, I'm still looking forward to 1.17.1, mostly for better drowned copper drops, which was a feature we discussed in previous week's updates. On the stream this weekend, like I said, I found a double zombie spawner, so I'm probably now going to use that to farm copper when we update Empire's SMP to 1.17.1. That's probably going to wait for a couple of mods of our own that we've been using, like the proximity mod, the replay mod, and shader support mods, whether that's people using Iris or people using Optifine. On the flip side of that, I'm going to be updating my hardcore world right away, because I want to take advantage of some of the bug fixes that have come about. The interesting ones to me from these pre-releases, though, are the changes in ore distribution, because now that there has finally been appropriate documentation of the changes in diamond ore distribution between 1.16.5 and 1.17, it turns out they are more minor than people thought. And I think a few people were maybe over-exaggerating the effect it was having, and they'd had luck mining at different levels for ore distribution, and it turned out that was just, they tried something different and it worked for them. I've definitely heard a few people advocating for still mining on the levels that we had previously, and it seemed like it was what Sliced Lime described in the bug report as an off-by-one issue, where I think it was just the case that something had been added into diamond ore distribution. You were finding veins generating up to Y16 and maybe like a block above where they normally would, but for the most part, like, it hadn't changed as dramatically as people thought it had. On the other hand, emerald ore has definitely been identified as generating too often, and naturally this was something people were going to bring up to me, because if you don't know, I am kind of a fan of emerald ore as a block, because of its rarity. I like to silk touch it. The fact that its product, emeralds, can be gotten very easily through villager trading, I advocate for silk touching emerald ore blocks because they are unique. And a lot of people joked around with me that this update was going to ruin my plans for emerald ore because it wasn't going to be as frequent anymore. And the truth is, I never really had a plan for it. I just like it because it's rare. And so, if anything, this fix is making it more rare, which adds value to it for me. An abundance of it is not necessarily what I want. I just like to hoard the stuff where I can get it like a collector. So yeah, very, very happy that they've fixed that issue. And it's honestly really weird to me how superstitious almost people get about diamond generation. I feel like rumors circulate about not being able to acquire diamonds, and the community runs with them until somebody actually does the maths and finds out that it's not as different as they thought it was.
And I mean, like, and being on a 4-year-old server where I have a beacon with like strip mine underneath my witch farm, I'm never going to need diamonds again.
Right?
I get the one caveat there is that even on a multiplayer server, we don't use diamonds as currency. So I don't need them for anything. Like, once you've got a set of gear, a backup set of gear, and it's netherite or whatever, like, I haven't found the need. Plus mending, like, you're not going through pickaxes, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
it doesn't really hit me quite as much. Plus, when I was mining for diamonds, even the first time, I wasn't doing like the must mine at Y11. I cleared everything out to bedrock. So like, you got all the things that were there.
Yeah. If it's hiding in the chunk, you're going to find it. And
yeah, exactly.
As somebody who advocates for the villager trading route to get an early start in Minecraft, I've been getting all of my diamond gear on both Empires and my hardcore world from villagers, which takes a little bit of extra grind, just, farming trees so that you can sell sticks to fletchers for emeralds and that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, I have not really needed to go mining for diamonds, to the point where I now troll my stream chat whenever people tell me, oh, you didn't go and mine those diamonds over there. I'm like, what diamonds? You mean, there's a skeleton over there. What are you talking about? And yeah, I have a bit of fun with that. But honestly, I've been collecting diamonds just to turn them into blocks to then build with, rather than it really being something that I need to acquire for tools and armor at this point. And neither my hardcore world is just me, but Empires doesn't have a diamond-based trading economy, so we're trading directly for each other's resources instead of using a currency. So I think it's interesting to play things a slightly different way and rely on diamonds a little less.
Before we move on, I want to say again, thanks to people that wrote in. I was able to track down some of the links, and we'll have those in the show notes for Iris and Sodium in terms of also keeping tabs on when Sodium might be done. But now that Iris, with its own version of Sodium, is available for Minecraft 1.17, I might give it a go. I'm curious to see if there's enough performance updates that I might even be able to play with shaders instead of just having to go with the vanilla Minecraft look, just for fun, just to kind of see if it's something that the computer can handle, can the stream handle it. Having more options than just waiting for Optifine, I think is good for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, it can only be worth a try, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, thank you so much to people who've written in, and if you would like to email the show with either a correction or an email that you'd like read on Chunk Mail, the email address is spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. We're going to move on to Chunk Mail now, where our first email comes from Solid Rock Carter with the subject of the Colorblind community. Hello, Pixel Riffs and Joel Duggan. I've been listening to your podcast for about a year now and have really enjoyed it. While I was playing Minecraft recently, I upgraded to enchanted netherite gear. As I am blue-purple colorblind, I was disappointed that I couldn't tell it was a netherite pickaxe, for example. The purple blocked out the black and it just looked like a purple pickaxe. I was happy about the ore texture change, but I think they could do something more. However, there are a few benefits, such as diamond armor looking grayer, so the ability to change it like the monochrome logo would be nice. Also, has Mojang released any information about updating 1.17 worlds to 1.18? You couldn't update snapshot worlds to extend the build limit, so I was just wondering. Sorry for the long email, but keep chunking along. Solid Rock Carter was rammed by a goat, but he had a water bucket. The creativity just keeps piling onto these sign-offs, right?
Yeah, I really like them. I think they're a lot of fun, especially when they tell a story. Like you thought that the goat got the best of him, but nope, he had a water bucket.
The
a
MLG.
a skill I do not possess. I have tried and I give up. I can't. I'm not that. I don't have the young reflexes for that kind of thing in Minecraft. To quickly answer the second part of the question, yes. The Minecraft YouTube channel put out a video. I think we covered it about a month ago, maybe 3 weeks ago. It's called Caves and Cliffs Special, Looking Forward. And in that, Agnes talks specifically about how they want to be able to bring 117 worlds forward into 118. So you'll get a little bit more information there. I think you'll also get more information as the snapshots and other things develop. As we report here on the show, as Mojang addresses this, I think this is going to be something they're going to talk about a lot, because I think it's going to be on a lot of players' minds because of the drastic changes that are coming with 118.
Yeah,
but yes, they are keeping it in mind for sure.
It is certainly one of the questions I get asked quite a lot on streams now. If people are just firing questions at me in the chats, they do ask me if I know anything about how they're going to change update worlds to 118. And yeah, it seems like anytime they make a Minecraft update, they always want it to be compatible with your old worlds. You'll always be able to bring stuff forward. It's just rolling back that is going to be a significant problem to you. So in Bedrock Edition right now, if you're using the experimental toggle to try out some of the Caves and Cliffs beta stuff, you can update to a world that has increased build limits, but I believe right now that just generates a wall of bedrock underneath any old chunks. I don't think that is their final attempt at solving this problem. I think it's just something to get an easy solution out there so that they can focus on testing those features with the Bedrock community. But I have a feeling that Mojang can do some stuff to try and transition worlds a little bit more easily into 1.18. They are working on that stuff. That's as much as I know.
With regards to the color blindness and the enchantment glint and other things on netherite gear, I hadn't considered that much because, of course, not being colorblind myself. But I'm wondering if there is a texture pack that you could apply. I mean, the first thing that I would suggest would be using a texture pack that removes the enchantment glint entirely, which is what I use, but not because of color blindness. I just think it doesn't look very good. The first benefit that I noticed was that I can actually see the different colors of the potions between light blue, dark blue, orange, red, and maroon for the different potions in Minecraft. Like, it's very beneficial to not have the enchantment glint on. That might not be great if you're blue purple colorblind, because there's a couple of potions that are very similar in terms of their blue color, so especially if there's also bottles of water that would be in that mix as well, so you might not find that works. But I'm wondering if there would be a texture pack from the community, the community of people that play Minecraft that are colorblind, that you might be able to find that could help you out in that situation. Again, it's not a solution from Mojang Studios, but it's a solution that might be out there for you in the interim. I realize that this is also some extra effort, but I actually have a texture pack on my diamond tools because I don't like the blue diamond color. In the process, though, I also could not resist attempting to change the way that they were designed. So my diamond pickaxes are actually longer and pointier than my regular pickaxes. And that was because my diamond tools are a brighter bluey white and can often be, or could have been, in my mind, mistaken for iron tools. Most people ask in my chat, in terms of what question I get a lot, is what texture pack am I using? And so I have changed the silhouette of the diamond pick, the diamond axe. I think the diamond shovel is about the same. Same with the diamond hoe, and diamond sword is actually different as well. So having that kind of a shape difference, if you want to go in, because with changing the icons in your hotbar, it's really simple. It's just one graphic, and then Minecraft automatically creates like the model of the thing that you're holding. So if you're okay with pixel art and you want to go in and mess around and just change maybe like the width of a handle or the shape of a pickaxe, you could easily get yourself, a discernible shape that will help you identify a netherite from diamond. And I find it's been fun on top of helpful, for me in my world.
Just a quick Google search has led me to a Planet Minecraft texture packs tag for colorblind texture packs. And some of these may stretch the definition in the case of this example. I think there's a couple of them that simply remove a lot of color from Minecraft to simulate colorblindness for a, normally sighted person. But I think... I think some of these are potentially going to be useful, if not in this case, then in the case of other folks who have different types of color blindness. So I'll leave a link to that in the show notes as well. It's just planetminecraft.com/texturepack/tag/colorblind, and colorblind spelled without a U for those of us who spell words with extra U's in them. There's a few different things there, just kind of looking through them, that are either, visual assists of other kinds, like enlarging the ore textures and having different ore graphics so that you can see them a little bit easier if you have difficulty discerning between those, but also changing up the colors of various materials to help discern between them. So yeah, hopefully there is something out there that will be able to help you. I personally will second Joel's recommendation for a texture pack that removes the enchantment glow entirely. I adopted one of those towards the end of Survival Guide Season 1 when Netherite was introduced, because I didn't like how overwhelming the enchantment glow was on Netherite gear. I think even without, even with the enchantment glow normal, it just looks like stone gear somehow. Like it looks like you're using an enchanted stone pickaxe, but the netherite tool texture is relatively subtle. So I liked seeing more of that by removing or at least lessening the enchantment glow through the texture pack that's on Vanilla Tweaks.
We're going to move into a meteor email that we're going to spin into the main discussion. It comes in from Rancher, and its subject is Farming in 1.17. Good day, Jonny and Joel. I recently stumbled onto your podcast after finding picture riffs on YouTube, and I'm hooked. I work in agricultural and ecological research in real life, so the intersection of farming and renewable resources in Minecraft has always fascinated me. Before listening to this week's podcast, I had already been thinking about the latest update and what it portends for the game as a whole. It seems like there is a shift from easy renewable resources of prior versions of the game to more of a do-it-by-hand approach, unless one has the technical skills of Nembon. For example, it's really just not worthwhile to farm copper, it seems. Similarly, the amethyst's immovable characteristics and slow shard growth make that more of a hand farming situation, and the lava in cauldrons can only be hand harvested as of now. Fingers crossed for a dispenser cauldron interaction in 1.18. Do you think this reflects a slight shift in the paradigm of the developers from making everything pretty easy to farm once a resource is found to making things much more exploration or travel dependent? On an unrelated note, apologies for the long email, I was nodding in agreement with your discussion of neutral or friendly mobs in recent updates. As someone who work is tied to grazing animals, ranging from horses to cows, sheep, and goats, it's disappointing that we have so many animals in Minecraft who manage to be so useless past early game. But I suppose that's a topic I could prattle on about for far too long. Suffice to say, I think that developers could easily check the box of cuteness and utility for more of these mobs rather than opting for just the cuteness alone. Beeswax was a good start in that direction, but the goats and axolotls were 2 steps back from that, 1 step forward. May your copper be waxed and your shards be plentiful. Rancher.
I mean, a very appropriate username, Rancher, and also this is the second of our 2 emails that has also apologized for a long email. Long emails can be read on the show, so don't feel the need to apologize every time. But we appreciate when things are concise. In this case, a fascinating discussion, and great to have the insight of somebody who works in that kind of department and thinks a lot about agriculture and renewable resources in our own world. So this we wanted to spin out into a topic of what's kind of hard to find versus easy to farm. Touching briefly on the animal note, the second half of this email, when it comes to adding in functionality for mobs in the game, obviously there are some mobs which in real life we domesticate, and that makes them a little bit easier to understand as farm animals, but the wild animals like axolotls that we end up, bring in for tanks and so forth and aquariums in our homes, they are, a little bit more exotic feeling, and so it's kind of and not necessarily used for anything particularly important in the real world. So I think it's interesting to balance how they would be used by players. I honestly think I'm gonna withhold my judgment on goats though until we know what goat horns do, assuming they're still included in 1.18 and they're on the slate as a feature, because glow ink for the glow squid didn't seem all that great until the 11th hour, and now I think it rules. I think it justifies the existence of the squid from a drops perspective. So I think I'm withholding my judgment on goats until they are a more complete feature.
How would you feel about different functionality being brought into previous animals? Like if in a future update, like the animal update, maybe they give extra functions to cows or pigs or other existing animals in the game, llamas, for example.
Yeah, see, I honestly think cows already do enough, because they provide one of the best food sources for survival players, and also leather, which is a fairly important resource for enchanting setups, item frames, and everything else you end up using leather for. So I think farm animal wise, cows are much more useful than the other ones. Sheep obviously give us wool, and wool is a pretty useful building block required for beds, carpets, all of that other stuff. I think pigs are the odd one out here. The points of a pig used to be a food source that's similarly good as beef is, but you don't get leather from pigs. And then you could ride a pig back when a pig was the only thing you could ride. Since then, we have horses, minecarts, elytra, so many different means of travel. And so nobody really rides a pig anymore except for fun. And even then, it's not that fun. So I think, I think the humble pig could do with a bit of a glow up. And I think I've heard people suggest in the past that pigs should be able to either locate or just dig up mushrooms. Mirroring the way that they are used to hunt for truffles in real life. And brief sidebar: there's a Nicolas Cage movie coming out in which he is a guy who hunts for truffles for the restaurant industry with a pig, and the pig in the trailers at least is like stolen by somebody, and he's like ambushed, and the pig is pignapped, and it looks like John Wick but with a pig instead of a dog. It's look up the trailer after the show. I'm telling you, this is not like a backdoor pilot for my Nicolas Cage movie podcast, because Lord knows there are enough of them already, but the trailer for this thing is wild, and I don't think it's quite the movie they are putting it across to be. It looks like more of a contemplative movie about the restaurant industry, but still like an interesting trailer. But yeah, truffle hunting is my point. Aside from the Nicolas Cage tangent, I think I think pigs being able to root out mushrooms could be an interesting way of getting hold of mushrooms, especially since mushrooms then lead you down into like the path of suspicious stew and that kind of stuff. That does then lead in a little bit to farming stuff, though, because one of the things we've commented on the show before, what we've noticed with the mechanics of 1.17 versus the eventual natural generation of some of these resources in 1.18 is we're being asked to go out and find something that is fairly difficult to get hold of, but then becomes fairly easy to farm once you have it, right? And you're seeing this now with moss and glowberries, for example.
Yeah, so I had a very different experience with the Citadel versus the Snapshot world, where I found both glowberries and a geode pretty quickly. It took us a couple of boats to find moss, but again, it wasn't a long, because I'm flying around with a Lytra, right? Like it wasn't day one Minecraft looking for shipwrecks. Like it was flying around a coastline that I knew that I had trimmed the chunks on and found, I think it was 3 or 4 shipwrecks, and we found our first moss box. Like it really didn't take too long. But once you have them, like it's kind of ridiculous how quickly you can get more moss blocks. And when you can use moss blocks for more than just building, you get azalea saplings, you can bone meal any of the, received things. You don't even have to make your own carpet, like of the moss, from the moss blocks. You get more carpet than you know what to do with. So that I found, again, I don't want to say lopsided, because like this farm designed by El Mango, like that would have taken a long time and a lot of Minecraft ingenuity to really come up with. I've just copied the design, made it slower and put it on my server. But the glowberries, I was immediately struck by, well, I have 2. I'm pretty sure I can bone meal these to get more. We'll just do that. And then I, placed them on a vine, hit them with a stack of bone meal, and I had a stack of glowberries. Like it was just like it happened that fast. But in previous adventures, it had taken me a lot longer to actually in the Snapshot world. I never did find glowberries. We never did have a chance to play around with them before the 1.17 came out. So for me, it was this quick and stark difference between the RNG of finding a mine shaft with the right chest in it to get the glowberries, and then also how easy it was to get. Now, I've been thinking a lot about the geodes, because I was like, well, what geode do I want to spend the time creating some sort of amethyst farm in? Because those, on the other hand, you can't move the budding amethyst, just like a cave spawner, a monster spawner. You can only harvest and get crystals when the crystals are full grown. They only grow like plants, so like they have to be loaded within the player radius. They don't think they work in the spawn chunks. We don't have, and as a 4-year-old world, I'm not snipping any of the chunks from my spawn chunks, because that's old stuff, and so we don't get any geodes in our spawn chunks. So yeah, it's one of those things that there does seem to be a divide with some stuff that's very, very slow to go. Same with dripstone. Once you get some, you can start your own farm, but boy, does it take a long time. If you're going to build something big out of dripstone, you're going to be a while before you have a lot of it. Out of curiosity, since you've got 2 new experiences on 2 new worlds, one single, one multiplayer, how long did it take for everybody to start dancing around and gloating that they had new blocks from 1.17?
I think it's still happening with the small drip leaf. I think the wandering trader visits once again. I won't dwell on this every episode, I promise. But yeah, the small drip leaf has still only been visited upon one of the players on Empires. I still don't have any on either my hardcore world or Empires. And yeah, I went and found moss straight away because I needed it to terraform the desert. And so I was getting that day one, and everyone else was kind of, groans of jealousy until a couple of them had a chance to go and find it too. But that was relatively easy to get hold of because we knew where it was. You just dive as many shipwrecks as it takes. And I've definitely seen people struggling through, 10 to 15 before they get it, because that's just poor luck. I think the balance we're dealing with here is the discoverability of these items being gated behind loot tables and chance, compared to stuff like copper, which you can actually physically go and tear out of the ground anywhere in the world. And I think that is, while it is kind of a better way of acquiring those resources, and certainly the way it's going to work in 1.18, it's not really something that they could put in for every feature in 1.17, because that's effectively giving us 1.18, right? Like that's, generating moss abundantly in a lush cave environment is something that's being saved for 1.18 when the terrain has been tweaked enough to create underground biomes. So yeah, I think for the first little while, everybody was certainly celebrating those early wins of like, oh, I found glowberries, oh, I found moss, I got large drip leaf now, the dripstone farms going up, and I think it's slowly easing into, all right, how do we now acquire a lot of this stuff in abundance?
Yeah, I look at the stuff that's available now in 117, and I don't want to complain about that, like having to be super technical and build some really cool stuff in order to get things like 6,000 moss blocks or moss related blocks per hour, because building the farm was really fun. Like I can understand the idea of having something be really slow to farm in the same way that crops are kind of slow to farm on your own, but once you figure out how to help get a villager to help you do it behind your back, once you've got that set up and you're off doing other things, then those things can kind of happen in the background, right? I feel like that's part of the satisfaction of farming and figuring out either redstone contraptions or other game mechanics in the game, is the fulfilling nature of setting one of those up and then giving yourself the freedom to then go do other things. It's like it's the convenience of having like a coffee maker with a timer in your kitchen. Like that kind of a thing I find really, really satisfying in Minecraft. That said, I do also appreciate some of the early game, just want to get a quick wheat farm up and going, a couple of crops here and there. It feels more rustic. It slows things down. I think there is something from a game design perspective about the slow hand collection of, we'll say, amethyst, because it's front of my mind right now, that creates value, right? In terms of this thing is really hard to get, or it's really time consuming to get, or you just have to wait around, and therefore no one is going to have or very few people are going to have thousands of these things on hand, and that just increases the value it takes to get it. So I find that's an interesting mechanic.
I think Mojang has been quite smart in allowing us to apply stuff like fortune to amethyst shards, because it balances a little bit more the farming approach, that the automation approach, rather than like it balances the automation approach with hand harvesting stuff, because if you have the time to sit there and right click on or left click on some stuff when it's grown to its full size, you get 3 times as many shards from doing that. And I think this is an interesting thing that I've noticed, and kind of ties back into Rancher's email here, is the balance of people who have a do it by hand approach, and the allowing players like that to still be able to get hold of a bunch of stuff, versus the technical players who are going to be able to whip up farms for this kind of thing, and often do so like in a test environment that isn't necessarily suited for everybody's survival gameplay. They're just farming stuff to say, like, theoretically, can this be done? And copper is another example of this, where being able to fortune copper means that I haven't had to think once about really farming it using the drowned, because I know that I can just go caving basically anywhere and come away with enough copper that I can make at least a stack of copper blocks, which doesn't sound like much compared to some of the other materials we get hold of, but when you're using copper as sparingly as I think most people are, you don't need a huge amount of it. So I think there's enough of a balance now, and the balance is being redressed between people exploring for resources and the people who have the stay at home and farm this at my base kind of mentality. We still only have half the picture of that, because I think a lot more of the exploration aspect is going to be emphasized in 1.18. But I think even blocks like Deep Slate kind of feel fairly balanced for now. I don't know if you would agree, but like getting hold of Deep Slate feels balanced enough, even though there isn't like a cobblestone generator way of farming it, because you can always fairly reliably find it at the bottom of the world. It can't be insta-mined, and there isn't like the huge environment of it that we're going to have in 1.18, but it still exists in abundance, and it's just a matter of taking the time to get hold of it.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think the I can't remember exactly what they called it, but they basically had like blobs or a way that Deep Slate was generating above Y0 to help it feel less like a line. Like there was above Y0 and below Y0 in the snapshot for the terrain generation. Below stuff was all Deep Slate, above stuff was all stone and other things. And so rather than having that be a very stark transition, they basically kind of like bled them into one another. And because of that overlap, we're getting the top of that overlap. It feels like in the bottom of the world. I've not had to hunt for Deep Slate. Like, I mean, the biggest problem for me with Deep Slate was I mined a bunch of it with a Silk Touch pickaxe and realized I couldn't do anything with it. I
Yeah,
had to,
yeah.
yeah, you have to get the cobble version. But no, I've not had any trouble finding it, and I've actually found stuff and exclaimed on stream, "Wow, this is a big pocket of Deep Slate."
Yeah.
I think it's because you're not hunting for an ore within the Deep Slate. Like you're just collecting the Deep Slate. It's like looking for stone, right? Like you just, or I guess if you went looking for andesite or granite, like once you find it, you're going to find like several dozen blocks at least. Like you don't really find very often just one or two pieces of diorite if that's what you're looking for. Usually it's a much bigger chunk, right? And I would say that that's been pretty abundant. And so I haven't really noticed it there, but I know for things like calcite, I've certainly felt that granite. Again, after me complaining about it last week, I found like the biggest geode of life. So, like, I walked away with very easily 2.5 stacks of calcite, having not harvested all of it from this one big geode. So, I think previously on the show I had said like, it'd be nice to have a crafting recipe for calcite, but I don't know. It's gonna the jury is still out on that for me because I don't know how often I'm gonna run into geodes. If I start finding them all the time, then I'm gonna think, okay, well, we're really not missing anything as far as wanting to find calcite. I don't need to be able to make it on my own. That said, there are recipes for andesite, diorite, and granite. Granite being something most people are not going to make because you can usually find enough of it and no one wants to spend that kind of quartz on granite. So if there was a recipe for calcite, even if it involved smelting, it might be kind of fun to have those options because having a block that's not renewable but is very we'll say scarce compared to the other subterranean resources like stone, granite, diorite. I feel like it adds two things. Like it creates that as a renewable resources, which I think just kind of gives people the ability to build with it more. Also provides an opportunity for people that don't want to rip down every geode that they find. Like if you wanted to keep them for whatever, maybe you want to live in geodes, not feeling that tear emotionally between do I want to keep the calcite where it is or do I want to mine the calcite out?
Yeah.
Like that having that choice as a player, I think is a stronger gameplay mechanic in Minecraft than saying like, this is the only place that you get it. And if you want it, tough luck. You have to mine it out and destroy this beautiful thing that's in the world because they are really cool. I've seen them a number of times now. And every time I find one, it's still like, wow, this is so neat.
Yeah, there's something about like stumbling upon those blocks and like the kind of concentric rings of a geode always look really, really pretty to me. I mean, we have enough of a fascination with them in the real world. The Minecraft equivalent lives up to that, I think. And yeah, I'll say this for calcite. If they add in recipes that allow people to make slabs and stairs of it, it is going to need to be renewable. I think the main thing that's holding people back from using it way more is the fact that it's only a solid block. It's not anything beyond that. Unlike quartz, which obviously people covet at this point, because if they want to build anything that looks like, Greek architecture or whatever, then you need a lot of quartz to do that. And so that's good that it's renewable through stonemasons. I think it would be a shame to have villager trading introduce a renewable calcite. Like I think it makes a lot of sense that calcite is. I don't think it's particularly hard to find a geode. I mean, you having struggled through this in your snapshot world, like maybe you'll feel differently, but I think the experience that you had in your abandoned mine shaft where you found a geode just by exploring that area because it's a network of tunnels that are already carved out for you. I tend to find a lot of the geodes that I've stumbled upon in either abandoned mine shafts or ravines because it's already an exposed large area of terrain that you just have to walk through, and it covers a lot of ground that otherwise a geode might generate enclosed in rock. So I think, those things are like honestly tipping further into the easy to find category for me, as opposed to being particularly difficult to find. But yeah, who knows? We'll see if maybe that balance tips again in future if people have other reasons they want to get hold of geodes and calcite. One other thing I wanted to talk about when it comes to world generation, looking ahead again to 1.18, is that with drowned copper farms looking a bit more viable now, and actually now having spent some time mining for and using copper, I wonder how many people are rebalancing their perspective on the huge veins of ore for 1.18, because they don't seem overpowered at all in retrospect. I think you still have to put in the work of mining all of those blocks to begin with, and the amount of copper that we now need to make a full block, even with fortune, you're going to come away with that in the same way that you come away from mining like an inventory full of quartz in the nether and then realizing, oh wait, this is all going to have to be converted into blocks and it's going to be like a quarter of what I thought it was. So I'm expecting people to enjoy finding those huge veins of ore and think, oh great, that I can put off building a drowned copper farm for a little bit longer. But I do think the copper farming aspect, the fact that we can get some of that stuff renewably, does mean that the finite resources around us don't have to burn out quite as quickly. And I think that's the state I will inevitably get to in worlds like Empires, where I'm going digging for copper basically a couple of times a week, is that eventually you run out of caves to explore in the immediate area. You have to either go further afield, establish a mining outpost, or you get into strip mining with a beacon, and then you are tearing out everything you can possibly find within that area. I do wonder how much copper drowned farms are going to be valuable to people who want to preserve the natural geology of their worlds a little more, and so I'm interested to see how that balances out. But the huge veins do seem like a good addition now in retrospect, because of the amount of copper they'll provide and the amount that they can emphasize that hand-gathered approach to people who don't want to build something as technical as a farm that relies on the zombie reinforcement mechanic to get hold of a lot of drowned.
Yeah, and I would say, like, as far as the technical level of farms go, I would put Nembon's zombie drown farm high. Like, even for me, watching that video was just like, okay, what's happening? Like, how does all this work?
I think it's the kind of thing that you can copy block for block relatively easily, but understanding all of the stuff that's going into it is potentially the hard part, right? I think understanding the theory behind these farms is so often the bigger half of the battle, compared to just, taking measurements and doing what he's done block for block and having something that maybe works just as efficiently, give or take a couple of things you might have overlooked.
And I think if someone was to build the equivalent, even if you managed to have like a double zombie spawner, monster spawner in your world, and you're able to AFK at a spot in between them and get tons of zombies to come in, I still think even after 117.1, the drop rate on that copper is still going to be slower than if you just went out mining. It's a matter of how people want to spend their time. Like, do you want to AFK and sit at the drown farm? You still have to have some sort of click macro, because they don't drop the ingots unless you the player are killing them. And I don't think you can hook anything. Like, I don't think, like, dogs will kill skeletons for you, and that counts as like a player kill, but it's not like zombified piglin where you hit one with a snowball and then all the ones that die from cramming register as a player kill because they were aggro with you. The zombies that are coming in from this farm, even if you from a monster spawner farm to be specific, not the reinforcement mechanics, you still have to hit them with a sword to get the loot. And you're not going to get, you're going to get a lot of junk. Unless you've got some clerics nearby that you can trade the flesh with. But like, zombie farms are not really, they weren't all that useful until recently. Now that said, like, if you want to build one for the fun of it and the learning experience, just like, all the power to you. Like, that's cool.
Yeah.
If a zombie spawner is what you find in the first few days on your Minecraft world, then by all means turn it into a drown farm, because you're going to get some copper and you're going to get XP that you need to enchant stuff. Like, there's a depending on how you're playing the early game, you do have those choices. But yeah, I would not put that zombie reinforcement drown farm from Nembon in the repertoire of most players. And
Yeah.
I mean,
I
save your emails if you are one of those players. That's great.
yeah.
But I mean, when you look at the 10 million people that play this game, I think that's out of reach of most.
Yeah, it's certainly not going to be as common as an iron farm is going to
No,
be.
exactly.
I think,
Yeah.
for example, one last thought I had about this before we wrap up the show is honestly, this is such an odd time to be discussing this stuff because anything we have to say about it now is going to be redundant in about 6 months' time. Right? Because 1.18 is going to add in world generation. All of that stuff is going to be accepted as part of vanilla mechanics. And while a lot of these mechanics will presumably persist, we don't know if Mojang plans to roll back any of the, you trade with villagers to get dripstone when there are dripstone caves out there. I imagine they wouldn't. They don't seem to be in the habit of, taking away ways of getting hold of these resources. But we exist now in this kind of limbo state where we know all of these blocks and things exist and we have ways of getting them, but the promise, the true way of getting hold of a lot of this stuff, the exploration ways and the environments that are going to really put a lot of these blocks in context still don't exist for us if you're playing the release version. So again, we sit at this really interesting crossroads between the older version of Minecraft and the new at this stage, and I'm curious to see what developments can be made in farming some of these resources in between now and then. Because you look at people saying copper drowned farms aren't going to get a whole lot, and then Nembon drops this on everybody. There are people who are going to be farming amethyst geodes the same way, probably, because I think geodes are still the most complete feature that we've seen in 1.17. But then exploration is going to accelerate in 1.18, and going through those caverns, you're going to find a number of geodes there that you can just strip for resources, toss that in a shulker box, and move on. And so I wonder how 1.18 is going to change all of the stuff that we're discussing now. It'd be really cool to revisit this discussion maybe after part 2 drops and see
I agree.
how much we were, on the ball about and how much we've just left by the wayside in part 2 of Caves and Cliffs.
I'm curious about the geo thing, because I imagine with that much more space, maybe you'll just end up seeing, one, more geodes being generated, but also more geodes being exposed because of big cliffs, or not big cliffs, big caves, like the big aquifers and the huge open caves that you might find exploring deeper parts of the world once 1.18 comes out. I mean, I'd be curious to see how many times we're going to be changing our tune back and forth from it might go the other way. Like you might find in the first iterations of 1.18s, like these are everywhere. Like it's no sweat, And then if that happens, does that then affect, like I said, the predetermined value? Like if you can just get, amethyst crystals by walking in one direction for 10 minutes, then will that kind of removes the special feeling of it a little bit? It's an interesting balance. I don't much respect, and I don't envy the Mojang team that has to try to figure out what little nuances really help these things teeter on that edge of really cool, we want a lot of it, but boy, is it a pain in the butt, I'm not going to bother, it comes back to me working with those cave vines. It's do I enjoy the final look of this room? Yes. Do I want to build more with cave vines? Yes. Am I going to? Not right now. Not because it's not something I'm going to be doing everywhere. I'm not going to be making a lush cave that's ginormous by hand, because I will want those cave vines to be very specific, and that would drive me crazy. But it's that balance of time in versus how does it feel? I think that was the big takeaway that I had in the first few weeks of Caves and of Cliffs with the moss farming and stuff, is that how does it feel to work with these new blocks? And while it did come easy, the amount of moss that I'm getting, it felt fun to do it. It felt cool. It was a great project, and still continues to be 2 weeks later. But then with geodes, once I get the amethyst crystals, I still have to play with tinted glass. I don't have a spyglass yet, but I mean, I've got Optifine, so that's not a real big deal. But there's things once I have it, how often am I going to return to it? I felt like that with some of the warped and crimson blocks from the Nether updates. I have them, they were fairly straightforward to get, but I've not really built anything with them. And that's not saying they're bad. It's just that for me, like a personal experience with the game, it's just like, I haven't really used those that much. And they were very easy to get. I didn't need to build a big farm, to get them.
Yeah, so that's going to be, I think, where a lot of things are in 1.18. Like, you don't need to build a big farm for moss. It's just like you go through a lush cave and grab as much as you can, hoe in hand. But that is going to be it for this episode of The Spawn Chunks, folks. Thank you so much for listening. You can find more information about the show and links to some of the stuff we've talked about today at thespawnchunks.com. The music for the show is composed by me, and The Spawn Chunks is proud as ever to be a listener-supported podcast. As we said at the top of the show, if you're getting some value out of the show, you can consider putting some value back in at patreon.com/thespawnchunks. Joining our community there gets you an invite to our patrons-only Discord chat and gets us closer to our future goals of having a monthly Minecraft audio hangout with all of our patrons in Discord. Every month we just sit down and have a good old chat, like the quick login at the start of each of our episodes, which is kind of a long login occasionally, just about what we've all been doing in Minecraft that month. We're currently at 255 patrons, which is down from 257 last week, but that's the Patreon reshuffle at the start of the month, probably taking care of that. Special thanks, as always, go out to our content engineers, General Patton 82, Hunter 555, Jumbo Sale, Magma Cube Dude, and Yitz. Thank you so much for your support on this episode.
Sharing the podcast with your friends is the easiest way to support the show. You can find us at The Spawn Chunks on Twitter and Instagram. Personal recommendations are by far the best way to share the podcast. Just poke a friend in the arm from a safe distance and say, you should listen to The Spawn Chunks, and then tell them where they can go to listen. That includes iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and YouTube. You can email the show at spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. The RSS feed is linked on the spawnchunks.com, and the patron-only RSS feed is on the Patreon page. That's where you can listen to the render distance, the extended version of the podcast.
My name is Jonny, but online I go by Pixelriffs. You can find most of what I do at youtube.com/Pixelriffs, where I make two series right now, the hardcore survival guide, going through the mechanics and survival progression of Minecraft, and Empire's SMP, where I mostly steal other people's villagers and turn them into witches. I stream 3 days a week on Twitch, doing behind-the-scenes work for both of those series, and I'm also the voice of the unofficial Hermitcraft recap, which you can find through a quick YouTube search. Aside from that, I'm at Pixelriffs on both Twitter and Instagram. Joel, where can people find you online?
Everything I'm doing online, including my illustration and design portfolio, is at joelduggan.com. You can listen to my other podcast, The Citadel Cafe, at thecitadelcafe.com. This past week, Lou Page was on the show, and we talked about the Steam Summer Sale and some of the indie games that he's into and has recommendations for our listeners. You can follow me at Joel Duggan on social media, and of course, Joel Duggan on Twitch, where I am toying between two titles on the server, either the Bone King or the Moss Applesauce. I'm not really sure which I'm going to go with, but either way, I've built a massive moss farm on the server. Had a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to a dripstone farm. I think for the next little while, I'm going to be hitting the redstone farms just to kind of shake it up a bit. So check it out, twitch.tv/JoelDuggan.
Thanks for visiting The Spawn Chunks. The world outside is infinite, but you can't farm the wood for the trees.